Hi you guys, Happy New Year. So this first video of 2023, I want it to be filled with lots of flowers, and thankfully some Amaryllis bloomed just in time. So what I'm going to do today is put some arrangements together with Amaryllis and some ferns that I have here, and just generally talk about Amaryllis. So these particular ones I either bought online or in a local big box stores. The Amaryllis that I have been reblooming year after year are still in the basement. Some of them are not showing any signs of life, which is kind of normal for me. They usually take their time waking up from dormancy, but there is one that has a bud. So I'm not sure which one it is. I think this is a Tardiva. I'm really bad at labeling my own Amaryllis. But here's a bud. There are some. Most of them are not showing any signs of life. So this is a bestseller. These bulbs were ginormous. So I am sure they're going to bloom, but they're just taking their time waking up after dormancy. So if you have that happening to your Amaryllis that you're trying to rebloom year after year, don't worry, just wait a little bit. And actually, I don't think it's such a bad thing, because this way you can have succession blooming Amaryllis pretty much all winter long, from December to March. So I'm going to start with the first arrangement here, which is with my all-time favorite Apple Blossom Amaryllis. I just love the color of the flowers. They're these delicate pink flowers that fade almost to pure white when they are at the end of their blooms. So I went to the garage to see what kind of containers I have to accommodate the Amaryllis, because they are pretty large plants, and I also want to add some ferns and some other things to the arrangement. And I have this container here, which I love. It is ceramic. It is kind of high, which is good, but I think it's a little too tight for the number of plants that I'm going to put in here. And I found this one, which is a little lower, but it is much wider. And I think this is just the right size for me to jam all the things that I want to put in here. So I'm going to put this one aside. Forgot to mention the name of this beautiful Amaryllis right here. This is Magic Green. And I have about 5 of them. So I need a container even larger than this. So that will be my next arrangement. So I'll put it aside here. But the idea for this arrangement with the Apple Blossom is to cover up the legs a little bit. I do love the long stem of Amaryllis for cut arrangements, but in planted arrangements, they're a little too imposing. So I like to soften them up a little bit with ferns. In this case, I have a Phlebodium fern. I had a lot of choices, like the Asplenium and the rabbit's foot here. But I think this one is just so beautiful, and you only need one to fill up the whole container. So what I'm going to do next is just add some soil and start planting. So as I'm planting this one up, I wanted to talk about Amaryllis not rooting, which is kind of a common problem for me. So the way you know that your Amaryllis is rooting is that you see some roots coming out of the drainage holes of your container, like you see right here. Another way you could see is you can tug on the bulb, and if it's not coming out, that means that your Amaryllis rooted. I've had some Amaryllis this fall that just refused to root, and what I do is I just place them in water. If you place them in water, they will have roots within a couple of weeks, and then you can either plant them up or you can leave them in water. All right, let's plant up the Phlebodium first. I've never had this fern, so I am very curious to see how it does. And of course, I disassemble all of this arrangements after the Amaryllis stops blooming. These have second buds, so they will have another flush of blooms, which is great. But I think overall this arrangement will last maybe a couple of months, which I think is really good for a living arrangement like this. Because this container is kind of low, I'm going to create a little bit of a mound and then cover up soil with some moss so it doesn't spill over. Okay, so you see all these roots right here. And don't be afraid to replant your amaryllis. Even after you planted them in smaller pots like this, they take to replanting really well. I've done this for a number of years now. Oh, isn't it so pretty already? I love making arrangements like this in the winter because even though you're not gardening outside, it is really training your eye to combine plants. So even small arrangements, tiny arrangements in little pots help you be a better gardener and better designer in my case. So don't be afraid to spend some time in the winter getting real plants and putting together arrangements like this. Because even, like take this arrangement for example. The large flowers of Amaryllis are so imposing that you need to soften them up a little bit with some finer texture. So Phlebodium is not that fine of a texture, but it's definitely not that bold texture. And the rabbit's foot, for example, is even finer texture, and they do look really, really good together. And another plant that I got in the nursery, and I was so happy to have found it, is primrose. And in this case, it's this beautiful light pink, which I think talks to the pink of the apple blossom. So I'm going to put it on this side of the arrangement and have these different levels here. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a branching in here to add some structure as well. Again, I am not a florist, and you know, I wasn't taught to put these arrangements together harmoniously, but as you work with plants and as you observe plants and look at their color and shape, you start to combine them better. And again, putting arrangements like these in winter will prepare you for the garden season, because if you're having difficulties combining arrangements or combining plants on a small scale like this, you may have even more difficulties putting together a large garden bed, right? So start small, as I always say, and then when the summer comes, you will be more prepared for it. All right, so you see how right here there's a lot of exposed soil, and I kind of like it because it gives it a little breathing room, but the soil is actually going to wash away as I water it. So what I do is I usually just add some moss, which is both functional and beautiful. I get a lot of questions asked, where do I get my moss? We have so much moss growing in the backyard. A lot of people in our neck of the woods try to get rid of moss in their lawns, in their backyards. I embrace it. I have a whole moss farm where I get my moss for arrangements like this. All right, so the first arrangement is done, and I love it, you guys. I know it's kind of hard to see with all of the plants in the background, but I will take another photo of this with more like a neutral background. I just love the combo of the fern and the Amaryllis, and the primroses look so cute. Oh, love it. And the branches, I felt like it needed a little bit more structure in here. Let me know if the branches are a little too much for you. They are not for me, but I know it's totally personal preference. All right, so the next arrangement is with this magic green Amaryllis, and it's a beautiful, more subtle in color Amaryllis. It is green with some red striping. Now, each of these bulbs have 2 stalks, and I think some of the flowers will overlap, and once they are in this container together, it's going to be just a spectacular display. But because they're more subtle in color, I wanted to make it more of a woodlandsy arrangement with some ferns like the rabbit's foot and the asplenium and some branches. All right, you guys, the second arrangement is done and I love it. It is spectacular. I knew it would be beautiful, but I didn't know it was going to be like this. I mean, Amaryllis flowers by themselves are really beautiful flowers, but when you put them together in an arrangement like this is like a piece of a garden in your home. And looking at something like this in the winter months brings me so much joy, brings me so much peace. And again, this is a great practice for those summer months when you're actually designing something in your own garden. So a couple of things about this arrangement. The Amaryllis flowers last generally about 2 weeks for me. They're very long-lived flower. Even as a cut flower, they last for a very long time. But these particular bulbs have 2 stalks of flowers. So after the first wave is gone, I'm going to have another 2 weeks. So arrangements like this can last up to a month and maybe even more if you have a little bit of cooler temperature in your house. And then I'm going to cut the bloom stalks down, but I will have the ferns left. They are just absolutely beautiful by themselves. And then when summer comes, I place these Amaryllis outside in my flower garden as per usual to make sure that they bulk up for the next season's bloom. Now, there was one thing that I could not figure out is how to incorporate this branch over here. This branch is from our Japanese maple in the garden. It's a dead branch, but it has such a beautiful, intricate structure. It was really hard to work it into this arrangement because it was kind of damaging the stalks of Amaryllis and the flowers. In fact, I broke one flower, but these actually last a couple of days even without water. So I'm just going to place it on the countertop or something. But yeah, there was, you know, some challenges, but in the end, I think the branch adds a little bit more texture and that woodlandsy look that I was going for. And when you start an arrangement, you never know how it turns out. And a lot of times I hate it. I can't stand it. I take it apart and I start over. This one, love it, you guys. And the last amaryllis I have for today is Mystica. And Mystica is a cyberster type amaryllis. And the flowers on cyberster type are a lot smaller than your regular type amaryllis, but I find them the most exquisite. Also, these particular bulbs gave me 3 stalks. Actually, this one and this one gave me 2. Cyberster type amaryllis, usually their bloom time is a little bit shorter than a regular type amaryllis, but because you have so many flower stalks, you can still get anywhere from 3 weeks to a month of bloom. Now, what happened to these bulbs is that they refused to root for me. After I planted them, I checked on any root development a couple of weeks later. There was no roots. 3 weeks later, I could see the bloom stalks already starting to develop and there was still no roots. So what I usually do at that point, because it happened to me before, I take them out of the pots and I place them in containers of water, whatever you can find. Coffee mug will do fine. And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, they started forming perfectly great roots. So at this point, what I could do, I can plant these in soil or make an arrangement like I just did with the previous ones, or I can continue growing them in water. And actually, that's what I'm going to do. I have these 3 vases, and I think these will be just beautiful displayed just in water. All right, so what I'm going to do is fill the bottom of this vase with some gravel, or in this case I use lava rock. You could use pea gravel or whatever stones you can find. This is going to be a little loud. Okay. And then I'm going to place my amaryllis bulb on the bottom. I'm actually going to add a little bit more to stabilize the bulb. But obviously do not cover the neck of the bulb. All right, now is the important part, is adding water. So I'm adding only as much water as it touches the bottom of the bulb to make sure it doesn't rot. All right, this should do it. This looks a lot better, but I forgot to cut the spent blooms. It would have been a lot easier when the bulbs were out of the vases, but I will try. There you go. There you go. All right, final touch. I cut some birch branches from the garden, and I think they will look beautiful with these amaryllis. I think the birch branches add that special garden touch. I really love it. It would not be the same without them. As for the care for something like this, make sure that your water level is up to the bottom of the bulb, but never up to the neck. Make sure that the water smells okay. If you smell something funky, definitely change it. But after you're done with this arrangement, after everything wilts, you can just plant these bulbs in the pot with soil where they will leaf out, and then you can either plant them out in the garden for the summer like I do, or leave them in the pot, but make sure you keep them in a bright location. Anyway, thank you so much, you guys, for watching this video. I think I got my flower fix for this week, at least. Amaryllis season is just starting, at least for me. I still will have a lot more amaryllis coming next month and maybe the month after. In fact, I bought one today when I went to our local nursery, and they actually had some sales because they're trying to move their inventory for all the spring stuff that is coming. So I got white nymph amaryllis that is I'm going to plant today, and hopefully we'll see it bloom in a month or so. Anyway, thank you so much, you guys, for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something new, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.